Okay, brilliant. So as we come together today, I think just in the interest of compassion and empowerment and epistemic justice, I'd like to just begin by acknowledging my own positionality and privilege in the space. This is meant to be a grab bag for you to take back enjoyable things to your class, things to empower you, things to empower your students, and hopefully new things that I'm teaching forward. Um, so let's see. To begin framing with compassionate pedagogy, I like to distinguish that empathy and compassion are different parts. As an actor, I empathize with my character, but compassion invites us to take a step beyond that and inspires us to action, and it requires participation of both parties, and that participation can be negotiated. But how compassion centers in my pedagogy, I back to learning comes before my own ego in the space. And that has been a North Star for me in my own work. And in the interest of compassion, Tara Brach has written a text called Radical Compassion, in which she brings to the foreground a RAIN practice, which we'll do in a moment here, but invites us to attune, attend, and befriend instead of fight, flight, or freeze, as the stresses of creating and the stresses of the academy or the stresses of an educational system bear on us. How can we attune, attend, and befriend internally? And so if you just want to take a moment, we'll do a if closing your eyes serves you, if lowering your eyes serves you, all of this is an invitation. It is a guide. It is an offering. You do what serves you, but just recognize what's in this moment. Maybe that's the thinking, or maybe breathing, or maybe the mind is turning. And allow is the A of rain. Can you be with what is present? I spend so much time pushing things away. Can I be with what's here right now? The eye of rain invites us to investigate on a muscular level. Where do you feel in the wisdom of your own body, gripping or ease or joy or doubt? Letting the musculature and the tissues of the body serve as a teacher. And then finally, the N of rain is nurture. We're not survival of the fittest, we're survival of the nurtured. And I often will, in a longer practice in class, invite students to put a hand on their chest or their belly. I like to even just sort of swaddle my own face and really offer a whole minute of silent practice there, where we're all on the same level, nurturing ourselves. The other framework that I'm bringing into this today is that of epistemic justice, how we know what we know, how we come to know what we know in a just and equitable way. Epistemic justice demands that we begin actively to see who is interrupted, who is granted deference, who is credited for a good idea, who is called upon in classes and seminars, and who is rewarded for good performance. And so epistemic injustice then is an epistemic that disempowers, discredits, and denies access. How are we, and that's an invitation for me to think about how I might be disempowering or discrediting or denying access to a student. And so we're looking at ways to empower, to credit knowledge, to credit learning, to credit teaching that my students teach me, and to create access. And in this work and what I'm sharing today, that all comes to in an embodied way. And that's what even the RAIN practice offered us a taste of. that we're going to look at the work of Arthur Lessac and Carrie Margolis. And Arthur Lessac gives us this beautiful book, Body Wisdom. I'm going to grab my laser pointer there, and that we're honoring our teacher within, that there's organic instruction inherent in all of this work. And I currently live in Boone, North Carolina, and it's a beautiful place, but we had a very challenging fall semester with the hurricane that happened here. And in teaching a movement course, I came back from the hurricane intermission, if you will, in the semester. We had to pause classes for a number of weeks. And I offered this, that if the body can be a place of refuge, a place of knowledge, a place of your own wisdom, that was real learning. That was epistemic justice for me, that you could come to find safety and knowledge and wisdom in your own body. So Arthur Lessac's work as one of the methodologies I'm offering today. Let's see if I can get there we go. Lived a very full life. And he created a neologism, a new word for a way of practicing, a way of knowing, a way of being, a way of training, a way of inquiring into the potential of the human being. And that was this word kinesensics, which takes its name from four roots. Kine, meaning movement. Essence, meaning essential. What's essential here? Sense, guiding us to our senses and our sensory perceptions. And sic, from the Latin meaning original. What is original and innate and organic to the human being? That can be a teacher. And so he offers a process of inner harmonic sensing. We're listening and sensing within and without. Body aesthetics as opposed to anesthetics. I often, and I noticed that I shifted there. Instead of weeing and speaking for my students, I'm going to try to speak from the I in this moment. And I think that's also a practice of epistemic justice, that I find myself numbing. Oh, I'm thank you, Zoom. That I find myself numbing with media or with internet or with digital or with food and all the ways that we tune out. And this is a way of tuning back in. And again, what's the organic intelligence that we can tap into, and all of the artificial intelligence that is ubiquitous now? I keep coming back to what is the organic intelligence that we can enjoy. And that we are accountable to what Barry Kerr, a teacher of Lessac Kinesensics, calls our teacher within. That the knowledge lives within. And that feels just to me, that it is not me telling the students, it's not me expecting them to have the right answer, that we are in an inquiry together. And so what that looks like in practice is this exploration of SPAR, which is actually very similar to the RAIN practice that we just did. We start with sensations. We identify how we're naming those things. We tune into what they're offering us, and then we let ourselves respond. Lessac, in his early life, he was born in Haifa, Israel, and immigrated to the United States. And he had a rich life as an opera singer and as a teacher and an instructor and an artist. And really his work stems from that difficult early life in which he was trying to find some organic pain relievers, some things within the body that offered him relief from what the external environment was imposing. And so he found muscle spreading, which might lead to muscle floating, and maybe a bit of muscle shaking. And those three simple pain relievers, when used intentionally, can become very specific and impactful relaxer energizers that I use in class. Yawning, laughing and yawning being two very lovely ones. They're all exciting. But I will put on my syllabus, you are allowed to yawn in this class, that I don't find yawning offensive. In fact, it is your way of engaging. It is the way your body is justly trying to engage in the learning process. And so I will use these in as we get deeper into the semester. Maybe there's just some yawning and sighing. Maybe I put on some music and there's some dancing. Artistically, these are great ways to unpack new things in a monologue or in a scene that it has been really, really exciting to see students laugh their way through a Shakespeare scene or dance their way through a monologue or sing their way through a scene. And I offer sighing and swallowing as really gentle ways, really private, gentle ways of recalibrating the body. And Dr. Paul Gilbert, who has created compassion-focused therapy, talks about we have a drive system, a soothe system, and a threat system. And in 2025, I feel myself living in the drive and the threat system a lot. But these relaxer energizers are an organic way that we can allow the body to teach us. Our teacher within can come to the fore and invite us to experience relaxation and energy at the same time. And I'd just like to invite you in a moment of pleasure smelling, the last one that's listed here. So again, an invitation merely. Maybe you close your eyes, maybe you lower your eyes. Maybe you offer yourself a moment of pause and give yourself permission, allow yourself, if you will, to imagine something that smells good to you. And maybe to support that, if this is enjoyable, that you offer cupping the hands here so that you can be in relationship to that smell. Maybe it's clean laundry. Maybe it's fresh cooked homemade soup boiling on the stove. Maybe it's freshly mowed laundry or freshly mowed grass, rather. Freshly mowed grass, fresh baked something. I'm clearly on a fresh roll myself today. So I'm learning from that. But that's my interpretation. What's yours? What feels or smells yummy to you in this moment? Perhaps you notice muscle spreading between the shoulder blades. Maybe there's muscle shaking that's occurring or muscle floating even around the eyes. I find that the pleasure smell is an intimate way of tapping into our emotional life and regulating and supporting our soothe system. And so I offer the pleasure smell on any of these relaxer energizers as a way to invite when there's a moment of tension or a moment of challenge, perhaps this is a way to come back to your own teacher within. And as we look at the other methodology here from the work of Carrie Margolis, who around 40 years ago started to work with, actually, she left high school early and moved out into the world and trained with all sorts of prominent theater artists and is inspired by the work of Bertolt Brecht, Etienne Decroux, and Jerzy Grotowski are the three sources that have inspired her work. And she was interested in how do I empower everyone in the room? How do I not tell the actor what to do? How do I give the actor the skills to solve the problem themselves? How do I empower the audience to lean in, to want to engage in the story? How do I build a dramaturgy in the room that empowers everyone to feel inspired by the story, by the moment? And so she's offering liberation from the director, from the teacher, from the script, that we're not subscribing to the theater gods, that talent and creativity will descend upon us if we're lucky, right? But that we can train and work and enjoy our own skill set. That we're not seeking approval from others. And I love these two quotes. She says, now getting off stage and hoping that they like you, that's not a good life. So it's about respect. How do we respect ourselves? How do we respect each other? And how do we aim for being respected instead of liked in the space? And in the interest of never dictating for the artist, of never putting the artist or the student in a position where they are trying to please me, she invites them to never do what I tell you to do. That it's not about doing what I say. It's you finding the just reason, the causality for yourself. You finding your own justification for the thing you are creating. I find that the relationality and causality in the space also to be rather empowering. That it is something acting on me that causes me to do something, not the teacher telling me to do something. Coupled with that Lessac work that I am sensing perhaps arise in the from the belly, or I'm sensing a down from my heart center. And then I'm in relationship to that feeling. And that can also be empowering. It's also a place of care that when you are sharing in the room, you are the most loved person in the room. And it can be challenging post-pandemic. And it was challenging before. um, that step from sort of workshopping in the space and maybe students working with each other to then someone independently sharing their work. And her work is all about, and I am borrowing this and offering this in the space, that this is about loving getting to share your work, that shouldn't be a feared place or an intimidating place, that it's not a place of criticism, but it's a place of empowerment. That in that moment, you are the most loved person in the room. So inviting students to share, I'll say, who wants some love? Not who wants to go? Okay, it's your turn. Get up there and do your monologue for us. But who wants some love right now? And I find that's my attempt at epistemic justice. And that we're accountable to the laws of motion and the practicability of an exercise. So both of these, Lessac Kinesensics, we're accountable to the teacher within. And in Margolis method, we're accountable to the laws of motion. She found great stimulation and honesty in the law and the fact that gravity is always working on us. The forces of the planet, the nature of nature is always working on us. And that even the act of standing is a resistance to gravity, that there's dramatic conflict even in the act of standing. And that our relationship to gravity inspires our relationship to motion, and therein is the storytelling. So it's not about what the teacher liked, what the director wanted. It is about the honesty in relationship to that plumb line of gravity, and can we practice it? We must be able to practice the work. Specificity elicits creativity. And in the specificity, we find liberation. So an example of how this might work, we did the pleasure smell in Lessac. And this is an example of what Margolis method might look like. That in the causality, two actors are working together, and this is their specific script. They get the choice of give or take. So one actor may offer my give, and the other actor responds, inspires my take. Or my give inspires my give, etc. So they're inspired by each other. And that language is very specific and intentional. And then we may expand that to narrow and broad. So my broad give inspires my narrow take. and giving them the opportunity then to play with and find solutions and challenges themselves with these specific limitations. But how they build story is up to the actor. And then we might invite them to make a 3-beat packet with those options. And then we might allow them to move through space over a series of steps. And so we're layer by layer, and this is what I found really empowering, and especially as we're finding more and more neurodiversity in our classes, that nothing can ever be too clear. And I found this work to be very, very clear. And that clarity then leads us to a way of talking about the work. That it's not again about what I like, but that what out of any one exercise, we can talk about feedback filters. That when we're giving feedback, it's on our way to building a rubric together. And this is the co-creating part that I wanted to share, that what's important in this exercise, what's important to the students. And that holds me accountable in the room too, that if they're coming up with things that I hadn't planned or thought were important, that's teaching me, and that's exciting. And is there anything that we can clarify together? So as we make our way through those different layers, we have very specific things that we can talk about. And for the sake of today, offering that these are possible filters, we could look at, are you inspiring the other, or are you being inspired? I think that's number one, that honesty reigns, that if I say inspires that's my text, and I have to own that. So if I'm not inspired, we need to look at that moment. That's critical. Are you being inspired? And what can you work on together? How can we justify, how can we make that a just moment that inspiring is happening? Are you doing what you say you're doing? And that's what I love about this work, is that it starts off with that very, what she calls scholarly text. So if I say, my narrow take, but I'm doing a broad give, my body's doing one thing and my mind is telling my voice to do another thing. And neither is wrong. But what do you want in that moment? Then we can empower the artist to say, okay, you're creating two options. Which do you want? What's the story you're trying to tell? Some other filters might be, are they really creating a 3-beat packet? Does it feel like there's a beginning, middle, and end? Do we have a clear number of steps? And then we can take that into what are the, here's a much more precise way of then building out that rubric. We come up with a number of skills. I'll show you what we've done in class here as we're narrowing in on our time together. That here's something that actually happened in class. So these are all the things that the students articulated as the skills for an exercise. And then we said, okay, what can we either get rid of or group together? And we started to create categories. So therein is teaching for me, what they find connected. And we can start to shape the rubric. And instead of 20 things on the rubric, now we have 3 things on the rubric, right? And then that makes its way into a much more fully articulated final rubric in class. So as we close out, what I'm drawn to myself, and what's critical for me in my own teaching in compassion and epistemic justice is that there is compassion in the space. Compassion, belonging, and agency are critical for me as I move through my own teaching. And I find that these practices allow me and allow students to be in relationship to themselves, to another, to both their inner environment and their outer environment, and even from one molecule to another, from one muscle group to another. That from inner harmonic sensing and feeling to the emergence of story through pattern that we got to see in Margolis method, the pattern of, let's say, excuse me, a 3-beat packet and how we could build out story from there. That there's an inner technology of knowing in the contemplative reflection that happens in both of those methodologies, and that there's agency. I am not at the mercy of the script. I am not at the mercy of the director. I am not at the mercy of the teacher, but I am my own agent here. And that, like compassion, these practices provide a container that can hold all possibilities, all people, all experiences. I'll let students work in their heart language if English isn't their heart language. By honoring the body's sensing and feeling process and the student artist's creative authorship, Lessac, Kinesensics, and Margolis method foster epistemic justice simultaneously for both teacher and student. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I think we have, we can take a minute or two for any questions or feedback or anything like that. This is very new to me, so it's really interesting to hear about these inroads. And, I think more and more people are using collaborative models and that sort of thing. So and I'm in more of the dance world than the theater world, but this feels like it can work in both of those things, right? Especially because of the embodiment practices. Yeah. So I'll open for any other comments or questions. It's sometimes a lot to process.
Yes, and I forgot to say, I do have a slide. Maybe I'll share my screen. I do have a slide that has my contact info on it. And so maybe that's also um, valuable for people if you would like to connect otherwise. Yeah, I have found Margolis method works great as acting for dancers. If I were to teach acting for dancers, that would be my way in. All right. Thank you.